I don't care if I agree or disagree with him. It's still the president of the United States.
Yeah, I thought we said that. Yes. That's the other. I said this one.
We get an owl. I never liked the owl right there. I never liked the overhead view because, you know, it just accentuates that. But as I've been told numerous times, nobody notices that view.
You got a good angle. You're all right. All right. We're hanging.
Oh, the overhead view just accentuates this little tough that won't go away.
We don't know if they're doing it or if they're.
Yeah, did you hear about our last planning meeting?
No,
Oh,
all those people wanted to speak.
yeah.
Great.
Actually, we're here. Hang on. I'll put the email up.
What happened? When people come on Zoom, they don't unmute themselves.
No, it wasn't. No, it was a technical difficulty.
Oh.
But yeah, it's even worse than than
Because when you go on Zoom, it's one that has to be needed before you even, that you can do it, right?
We had all those
You
people
have
that
to
were.
We
unmute
had
it, don't
3 or
you?
4 people, I thought they wanted to talk, but
So we all thought they wanted to talk.
but we couldn't.
Find your email is.
But it took me a while to figure out there's a couple buttons you gotta push.
Oh, yeah, the video and the microphone.
We had that when we had all the stuff, so I gave it all back to talk.
My son's off in college now, so.
It's very difficult.
We're all there.
During the pandemic, my dad, when I had my dad,
Put
he was in memory care, or he would go through this program called Memory, it's a Fox Valley Memory Project, and so they would do Zoom calls. And that was interesting. You get 20, 30 people who have Alzheimer's or dementia, uninsured. I mean, obviously, everybody had someone with them to make sure it was okay, but it's well, that was fun. Trying to get my dad just figured it out. He'd be like, you know, you try to push back.
There we go.
You're not making a projection.
No.
No, but I mean,
We didn't know.
No. So instead of saying no,
So-
I figured if they were on, they were on like wolf.
Here's the other thing.
That's an awesome
Smaller
story.
that I bring up is if you're on there,
So
you're
that's.
still at chat. So if something's going wrong, you chat.
Very
And
cool
you're-
about things that
You don't know.
You could be just,
So our public.
you know, in the sure. So
well.
I have an idea, but yeah, so.
We tried to,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, we are.
Let's overdo you.
but when I first read that, I said to myself,
So we would do with that.
So, yeah. let it
Yeah,
sound
we're all,
like-
everybody came to see us.
That's part of the reason I asked. you know, if I could take my time.
Because I moved them up.
Not all technological.
And if you try it once, then you circle back around a second time.
Oh,
And then as you went time on, it got better.
And this is good. I really do. Was she alive?
Just a good.
Might not have always agreed with me. Oh, really? What? Yeah, was it Hillary?
I'm not a
Chuckle.
chicken.
They always made me chuckle.
Oh, it was
I always make my voice.
Oh, yeah. So I told her back to this. And because monster died in the hospital.
Yeah.
I had to get this, we lost a bunch of contacts. So, yeah, so she went for 2 days. Yeah. It's a big one. So, yeah, I'm like, sitting there, like, how am I gonna run into this with over the next 6 months?
It's 8 o'clock, we'll bring the meeting to order of the Aviation Committee. Thank you all for coming. Item number 1, approve minutes of August 10th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion, any changes? Steve, you want to make? If not. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item 2, public comment on agenda items or any item under the jurisdiction of this committee. Does anybody have anything that they want to speak on at this time? Fred?
Well, I'd just like to invite you all to the pancake breakfast this Saturday morning, that'll be 7:30 to 11. It's part of our local chapters outreach, both to pilots elsewhere to come fly here. We sort of encourage them to free breakfast to those pilots who have experimental aircraft, but obviously it's an excuse for people to come out and fly in and see the airport. And more importantly, to the local populace, we have quite a number of young eagles signed up to fly, so it encourages the people that might not otherwise come to the airport, see the airport, have their children come take flight. So weather may really dampen our project this weekend. We'll see, but hopefully you'll get a chance to come out.
It's a good event for those of you that haven't been. Anybody else have nothing? Item 3, Airport Director's Report. Item 8, East GA Hangar Project Update. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We are now out to bid on the T-Hanger project for the East GA side. So that again is to construct 2 new 10-unit T-Hanger buildings and the associated civil and site work. With that project, we are anticipating opening bids on September 15th. That's administered through the Bureau of Aeronautics, so it's out there online for bidding. So if you know a contractor that might be interested, let myself or Mary Beth know. We'll have the links to the bid documents. We've got quite a few interested contractors that we're aware of that may bid it. And we had a pre-bid meeting a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So we had decent attendance at that meeting, some contractors that had some good questions, went on a site visit of the project site right after that meeting. And so we're hopeful that we'll get good bids that are in line with our estimates, in line with the available funding that we have on the project. There may be a possibility we'll push the deadline back 1 week for a number of reasons, but primarily we had to execute an ALP, airport layout plan, which is our drawing set, which shows everything on the airport. We had to do an ALP insert for this project because our old ALP didn't show what the development looks like today. In order to get federal funding for a project like this, federal or state funding, you have to have it shown on your ALP. So that's been in process for quite some time. We're still waiting on the FAA to sign it. It's basically been approved, all waiting its signature. So that is one big piece of the fact that we can't open bids and award new contracts until the ALPs, the ink on that document is dry. And so that's what we're waiting on.
When will you know they'd have to change the bid date by addendum?
Correct. And we talked about that at the pre-bid meeting, just because we know that might be a possibility.
Okay.
And so we should hopefully know that today or tomorrow, whether or not we need to push back 1 week. But we would put on addendum to all the plan holders, and they be made aware of that. So then they get an extra week. That's kind of what we've been talking about. So we did check with our DOA rep yesterday, and asked if there's any update to that. So we will be back in the next day or two. And again, having more time to bid it is probably also a good thing. for some of the contractors to get their bids in if they're, behind on other things. And so, but the primary driving reason is that we want to ensure that there's, no box that's left unchecked as far as our federal funding.
Anybody have any questions?
So we're depending on the FAA to get that deadline done a week later? Because it's got to be approved from the FAA, correct?
The FAA's already had their allotted amount of time to review the LP insert pages, so the change pages. And essentially it's been approved. Like all their lines of business have reviewed it, no issues, literally waiting on signatures. So that can take time as well. It's a big federal agency.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was like,
Yeah.
are they sure that they're gonna have it done in that extra week is what I'm
yeah.
asking.
Well, that's the answer we should get back today or tomorrow.
Okay. Curious.
I mean, we started having these conversations 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago with the BOA and FAA, and just approvals process, which was still in process at that time, but that's been essentially completed. There should be no reason it doesn't get.
Dot I's and crossing T's is all
Yep.
you're waiting for.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Item B. Fiscal year 2023 budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. In your packet is the full section for the airport's budget for 2023. We had our executive review meeting back in mid-August with the county executive, myself, Cameron Alec, Mary Beth was in there as well, finance and HR as usual. So with that, I will kind of run you through. I won't go through necessarily every single detail. It's about 17 pages of our budget section, but also for the new committee members that have been on this, the Aviation Committee prior to this year. Just kind of run you through a little bit. If you have any questions, I'll certainly answer at any time as we go through it. But the first couple of pages are just the different sections of our budget as far as what I would call cost center. So airport administration, field maintenance, maintenance shop, the fire station, which of course we own and operate, our air traffic control tower, the terminal building, and then there's a section there for other buildings, which is primarily our hangars that we own and some of the other buildings that we own that aren't allocated in the other cost centers. So that first page just kind of gives a description of what all those things are. The second page talks about accomplishments for 2022. I won't run through all those. Then the last part talks about our goals and objectives for 2023. A number of them do carry over from year to year. We've got things like continue to create additional sustainable revenue sources, both aeronautical and non-aeronautical, to improve the airport's financial position. That's a goal every year. And so, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the numbers of the budget. But when we've got rising costs that we've seen in the last year or two, that becomes even more important to identify other revenue streams and generally develop more property, lease more land, those sorts of things. It's a big driving factor of those that we can actually have some control over. There's other things that are, by and large, a bit out of our control on the revenue side of things, but as far as gaining additional revenue down that budget. There's a number of other goals in there. I'll just kind of highlight some of the big ones. Of course, the development efforts on the aviation business park, and not only that, but our other parcels of land that are developable on the airfield. One of the other big parcels is the one next door, where the terminal used to be. So we've got a number of efforts there on redeveloping that site. Actually just got a drone photo shot about 2 weeks ago to show what's available next door with that land. One way to the grass was grown in and green, that sort of thing. So it doesn't look like a big dirt patch.
After it recovered from EA.
After recovered from all the folks coming up for the air show. And actually it made it through that fairly well. And so, there's other, I always try to highlight, there's other parcels of land we have for development, just the business park. We talk about that a lot. But the business park itself is again 50 acres of developable land. It's a sizable amount of revenue when we get it all developed for the land leasing aspect of it. So that's a big goal for 2023 is to get that anchor tenant established in the park. We are already doing number 4. We're on the process of constructing new hangar facilities because we haven't done that in over 20 years as an airport. constructing new hangars. So that's a big plus, a big positive going forward for 2023. And the budget reflects that. Anticipated to those hangars, if everything goes to plan, right around the end of our venture timeframe of next year. There's a number of other ones in there, some mostly fairly standard things. There's which essentially all translate into financial impacts for the operating budget. The second page, or the next page of the budget section, there's only one change in staffing. As far as that goes, we have taken 2 of our equipment operator positions. For everyone's understanding, we only have 1 classification for equipment operator in our maintenance operations department. And so we're essentially taking 2 of the 4 maintenance equipment operator positions and creating equipment operator 2 positions. So giving an ability for a couple of our staff, either internally or externally, if we do hiring in the future, to have another level of promotion level that they can attain, which essentially has additional duties and requires a little bit of additional experience. And so we've tried to do what we can do internally to create those opportunities for advancement, and that's one of those pieces that we've included in the 2023 budget, which is going forward. Our net levy, this kind of highlights that. Actually, we had a target this year, as all county departments did, of staying flat on our operating levy targets. We were able to actually accomplish that. We're just slightly under our target, which was 708,000. Excuse me, our levy came in at $708,526 for the year, which was $385 underneath where it was in 2022. So while we're not a lot below, we're just below. Our goal was to meet that target that we have with the budget that's being proposed. Then skipping ahead a couple of pages, we've got significant changes page, which kind of really highlights what's different between 2022 and 2023. I'll run through the big ones on those items. First off, revenue. We've got a grant, which is our CARES Act funding of $69,000 that we're anticipating collecting this year. We're reimbursing for our operating budget. That'll really go to offset our hangar painting project that we'll talk about here in a little bit, which is our existing T hangars on the north side. Those painted. So we're actually going through that process right now with the contractor. And so 69,000 is the CARES Act funds. That's a revenue item because we'll receive those funds tentatively before the end of this fiscal year. We're actually in process right now for requesting reimbursement for those funds. 2020. So we have used those today, which is actually kind of a nice thing. Offset our operating budget to this year with that paint project. Fuel flowage, we predicted that to increase by $10,000. Really just looking at the trends from the last couple of years, which have been trending in a positive direction for amount of fuels sold at the airport. And for information, we get 10 cents per gallon. 10 cents per gallon for every gallon pumped on the airport. That's primarily that's the flight service doing that. Building rental, this is with the ordinance update that we passed at the last meeting. Those rates are increasing now due to CPI over the last few years. That translates into about $35,000 in additional revenue for next year, primarily just the hangar rental rates being increased. I'll skip ahead. There's a few that are fairly benign in there with health insurance, workers' compensation, capital improvements. One of the ones in this category in the improvement section within our operating budget is we're budgeting $70,000 now to replace the chiller in the air traffic control tower. We're having issues with, I believe it's the refrigerant type and model of that chiller. Not only that, but I know we've had quite a number of times the air traffic control tower was without air conditioning in the last couple of years. And especially up in the tower cab where it's all windows, that gets pretty hot pretty quick. So that's been an issue for the last couple of years through our facilities department. They've recommended, we kind of looked at maybe doing this in a later year, but they've recommended that we budget for that next year. We originally had $50,000 put into that item, but been told that it's probably more prudent to bump that up to 70. So that's the item improvements. Capital equipment is just a snow pusher blade, box plow essentially for airport's front end loader, 22,000. Promotions airport decreased slightly based upon our needs for 2023. Kind of skip ahead. Fuel, of course, has gone up. As everybody knows, we see the cost of the pump. So we've added $15,000 in our fuel category to accommodate that. Really not any additional usage, just cost increase. Excuse me. Maintenance buildings, this is kind of the offset for the funding that the CARES Act would go to reimburse, which is that painting project. So that's gone down 62,000. The rest, water and sewer, of course, that goes up every year, primarily with stormwater fees paid to the city. That's the biggest driver of that increase of 31,000. And then the rest are fairly straightforward. So it leaves our net operating levy, as I said before, under our target at $708,526 for 2023. Essentially to balance our budget for operating expenses. And then the next page and kind of details how we get to those numbers at a high level. And so I'll skip ahead to the detail. Probably won't talk too much on the detail as most of the changes are covered in that significant changes page. But there's all the high level detail for the budget 2023. If you've got any specific questions about any of those, we can come back to them. But I'm not going to run through those at that point. Just time. The next page is just those two capital outlays that I mentioned before, chiller and box plow. And then the final page just kind of gives an overview as it relates to cost centers, orgs as they reference them in the county. So administration, field maintenance, and then on down, kind of lists out each org, what the totals are for each. Pretty high level overview of the budget versus 2022 and 2021. Comparison table there. With that, happy to answer any questions, but as the county board supervisors already know, this will go to the board in October and should be a fun few days of budget meetings.
Did anybody find anything in that budget that they have a question on? What do you think?
Water and sewer, I mean, obviously we just have a lot of is that the increase, I mean, looking back, like every increase is just a direct result of whatever the city says their new annual rate for stormwater is. Okay. I know you've talked about a lot of the things that we've done to reduce that. As you're thinking, you know, the next couple of years, you know, we look, it's like $20,000-$30,000 a year, probably what you're starting to think about.
There may be some reductions in impervious surface with footprint, but they'll be minimal in the grand scheme of things. You know, as far as rate increases, the city's been averaging 67% annually. So they got way ahead of the inflation curve. Like, you know, they've been doing that for years, but I say that sort of jokingly, but it's a tough cost to keep up with.
Yeah.
Because we can't sit here and increase set rates to our hangar tenants or land tenants by 7% every year. I question the city multiple times on that, but of course I'm just one person, we're just one airport, we're just one entity. You know, and it's something that we don't really have, well, we have zero control over how the city adjusts the rates. So yes, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this year we were able to balance some of that increase against the obvious savings from relating to this building on power and lights and heat and everything, but obviously long term. So that's gonna be a big chunk of whatever levy money or whatever that we have every year. Okay. On contractual services, janitorial services, 55016. Can you tell a little increase there? Is that are we changing services or just the rate that we're paying or the fee that we're paying for the same services?
I think there's some additional services for this terminal building that we hadn't had in the old terminal building, which is mostly the cleaning of like the runner mats coming into the lobby vestibule. I think last year we didn't necessarily account for that. That's a sort of cost of the old building in this actually current year's budget. So there's a small increase due to that. And then I think we're anticipating our janitorial contracts maybe increasing because I think we're on a 1-year agreement with the janitorial contractor. So we've been anticipating a small increase there. Hopefully accurate in our estimate, but it's counts for that increase in janitorial.
And then on that line, prior to 2022, I guess, that work was mainly done by facility staff.
Which the same line item?
Yeah, I mean, so like, you know, in 19, 20, 21, we had just more than $1,000 in janitorial services. I think I recall at one point, the facilities director saying that they were pulling back some of the support that they were able to offer.
So facilities department has not in any recent history or even my knowledge any history cleaned their buildings.
Okay.
So the old terminal, they did not, it's just they didn't have staffing for it. We had discussions about the facilities department cleaning this new building. And well prior to its opening, that just wasn't going to be accommodated by their existing staff and their struggles of getting janitorial staff. So our airport staff have been doing cleaning prior to this.
Okay.
And it's just, you know, with everything else we asked of them, it's something that we made the decision to get a contractor to. And again, we try to use the facilities department, but it just wasn't possible. So, no, the facilities department has not provided that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then oh, sorry, I lost. Somebody else has a question. On the maintenance grounds. Can you talk a little bit about the increase there from 15 to 20,000?
74021.
Yes.
So typically speaking, that's the category we utilize other county departments for, primarily the highway department or physical repairs or maintenance work out on the airfield or any around the airport. And a lot of times that's crack sealing, seal coating, some areas of asphalt. That's but primarily our use and other uses over the years, certainly. So we try to use our highway department as much as possible on that. And so we're last year we had 15,000 allocated there. And I think maybe going over that slightly this year, but we're looking to increase that to anticipate their costs as far as the services they provide, and potentially doing a little bit of additional work than we had this year.
Okay. So that is primarily for repairing and patching concrete.
Primarily for asphalt. Yeah,
Asphalt.
we do a lot of concrete patching in house.
Yeah, they have an asphalt paver, which we don't have, so usually if we have any asphalt patches that we have to do, we outsource it to them.
Okay.
Item 4, Deputy Director's report, hangar painting project up to Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So this is an update to the hangar painting project. As a reminder, it was hangars A, B, and a portion of hangar C here on the north side. Just kind of continuing our hangar painting. We painted a few years ago, and so we're just continuing on with that. We did open bids a week or two ago. And the low bidder was Johnson Painting and Decorating out of Kenosha. They came in at the lowest bid, 46,000, and then Spees was second at 49,000. And then we had two other bidders for a total of 4 bids. So we felt good on that. Johnson Painting and Decorating, they're just a sole proprietorship, but they've been around 20 years. We checked the references, they've done work for Walworth County and Madison, City of Madison. So I just got the signed contract yesterday, so we'll be setting up a pre-construction meeting soon and then get going on that before winter arrives this year.
I had some questions from the facilities. And I tried to explain to them that when we go out for bids, we don't say only local contractors, because he was concerned that we weren't going to give the job to a local contractor. But the way that the RFP goes out, you can't say that. So, because we should deal with local taxpayers, I understand. But it didn't happen this time. And the last time we paid it was certified, which was out of Sheboygan. So if they're low bidder and they're low by a lot, we're saving that money that way. And we'll get the job done. So I hope that answered his questions if we can. And there's a certain group of people that bid airport projects. And so.
That's all I have.
Anybody have any questions? Number 5, discuss and approve amendment number 1 to hangar lease agreement with New View Technology Inc.
Thank you. So New View, if you guys don't know, is a longer-term tenant on the airport. They run a business repairing avionics, installing avionics, and also doing some maintenance repairs on aircraft. They're a great resource for our airport to have here. We are amending their lease because of new development next door to where they're at. So this lease that we're amending is for hangar K819, which is one of 3 hangars that they rent from us. This lease was interesting or different because it also tacked on a land lease. This lease was written originally a long time ago, but the latest version of it is 2017. And they have this extra land lease to reserve some space for expansion of their facility. And they also had a first right of refusal in that area in case they wanted to go really big. We would call them first in case other developers wanted that land to see if they wanted it. We had that happen about a year ago or less, where Felix Auto and Tire, if some of you remember them, they leased that land and New View gave up the first right of refusal. This is kind of just following up on all that and removing a chunk of ground lease that Felix is currently renting. And so we're just cleaning things up. We've talked to New View about this. It does lower their rent slightly. And at the same time, there was a rent adjustment due on the hangar itself. So we added that in as well, 3% per their lease. So with the 3% added to their hangar lease and then the land rental square footage removed, we came up with a calculation, and below my total on the agenda item report, there's some math there. I just wanted to point out that that math was wrong because when I originally was doing this, we were calculating the remaining land lease by our ordinance rate of 16 cents per square feet. But the actual remaining square footage is on a paved apron, which we have a separate ordinance rate for, 25 cents. So the total $950.56 per month includes that paved apron rate. I just didn't end up showing the math on this agenda item report, so that's why there's a little bit of a difference there. But you can see there that the land rentals 119, hangar rentals 830 for about $950 per month. And Jim, did I miss anything on the changes there?
No, just essentially that, Felix Auto and Tire will be building a new hangar that they've leased land for. In some of the same footprint as the New View historically had leased a portion of that land.
So should we take that paragraph out or correct it or?
I will correct it before it goes to P&F.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Just to show
we
accurate
can
math.
vote on it as corrected by your verbiage, right?
Yes.
I think the actual amendment itself is.
The amendment and the
2-page.
yeah, the resolution we have is accurate. It's just this report.
Somebody might pick up on that math.
If you look at the amendment itself down further, it kind of has that same calculation, but it talks about the different rate, which is 25 cents per foot.
Yeah, question about leases. When I was at my, I'm vice chair of the PNF, and we had an audit done, and they specifically talked about leases and about how we have quite a few leases that are inaccurate. And they went on and on and on about it, but they want us to actually hire someone to come in to review all our leases and to do everything. And I was just curious, I mean, I think you'd already left at that point when the auditor came in, but it was quite concerning what they were saying that were not just these leases, but over the entirety of the county. And I don't know if you've talked to Mike Collard about this at all, because he was there. We were having pretty in-depth conversation, but with leases in general, I mean, apparently we're inaccurate in 50% of them.
I guess my question is, how do you mean inaccurate, number one, and number two, were they referencing airport leases?
They were referencing some of the leases that are only because the government came back and said this, and this has to be in all the leases now. So it's kind of a government thing. Like, yeah, I mean, you're talking hundreds of leases that are within the county, but they brought that up and the auditors did. So I thought, have you talked to Mike Collard about this or anything? Because you might want to touch base with him with all leases now, because I know that they're considering bringing in someone.
Well, I know just in my time here, Corp Council has added paragraphs to new leases.
They did, okay.
That hadn't been in.
Council was there too, and they were discussing it too.
That hadn't been in leases prior. One of them was, I think, like Wisconsin Public Records Law paragraph, and then one of them, if I remember it, dealing with arbitration. And so there was new language that was added in the last few years by Corp Council to all of our new leases.
And I know you've worked so hard to clean up so many leases.
Yeah.
And I know that that's been one of your top priorities.
So that could be one of the.
It was just a surprise. I had not heard of this before until this meeting. So when the auditors talked about it.
To go back and amend, and a lot of, for instance, land leases.
Yes.
To go back and amend all those to put in new languages. That would be more of a question for Corp Council, whether or not that's. Really
yeah,
necessary.
and the
So I don't know
not
what-
just the leases themselves, but how we are recording them and the process of doing it apparently. So it was very overwhelming when they were talking about it, but I didn't know. And now that I'm looking at leases again, that's in the back of my head. So I had not been aware of until this meeting, the last meeting. So
Anytime we execute a new lease or anytime we amend, in this case, an existing lease or sign it, we run it through.
and it was a recording process too. Apparently we need to hire someone that sits down and just records it a certain way for it to be presented to the higher, yeah.
Does the
County.
auditing company do leases? I'll bet they
Imagine
do.
that, they
I
do.
bet they do.
Yes, they gave us 3 options on how that we could fix it, but they're trying to figure out if we will be, I know, exactly, that's the same question I brought up too. But they're looking at, if we will be fined or not if we don't comply with what they're telling us that we have to do it. So that is the question that's out there. So if we're not fined, we're kind of just like, do we need to go through all this process? Because we're talking hours and hours and hours work for each department.
Are we the only county?
No, they do other counties, but it was just alarming when they were talking about, because specifically with you guys, because you have so many releases here as opposed to all the other departments. And we're talking custodial leases, every lease, hundreds of leases.
I'll reach out to Corp Council.
Just ask, because I just want to make, when you're doing these, to be aware of that potential minefield that could be coming out.
This is pretty recent.
It was just at the PNF meeting that I was at, the auditors came out with it. So yeah, it literally just came out. And I believe, once again, it's more the recording and what you have to go through in order to do it. Minefield, seriously.
I think the recording side of it is not something that we do once it's out of our.
Oh, I think it may be something that they will require departments to do, so just FYI, just look at it, 'cause we're talking, if it's something that we're forced to do, which I'm thinking that perhaps, hopefully, that it's not, but that we're not gonna be fined for it. So, I mean, we may just turn a blind eye if we're not fined for it, because it's so much work and so expensive. Of course, they have a $15,000 solution, the auditor company did, so.
Well, we'll certainly reach out to our corporation council and see what. we can do.
But I just want to make sure we're not finding for it, because in the fight. We hire someone. I don't know, government.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah,
That's all I
we'll
had.
go back to our,
Sorry, I didn't mean to
that's okay.
be the wet blanket on that one. I just wanted to give you awareness of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're going for a
I'll-
motion.
I'll move to approve the airport hangar lease amendment with the new technologies.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion?
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. All right, discuss. Here's another one maybe they brought up. Discuss and approve an intergovernmental agreement for fire protection services at Whitman Regional Airport.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Your agenda item report for this one gives a pretty good summary of the history behind this agreement. Also gives a overview of how this agreement dictates how we operate the airport fire station. But essentially, the airport fire station was built back in 1974. We've had intergovernmental agreement with the city of Oshkosh since that time on staffing it. So essentially, we own and maintain and operate the building. We provide the space for the city to have their structural units for their city response. We also own aircraft rescue and firefighting vehicles, which are specialized aircraft accidents and fires on the air side of that facility to come onto the air side for response. Essentially, the agreement is we maintain and operate the building. They provide the staffing for all of our units. And so this agreement has been in force all the way back since 1974. Last time we made an update to this agreement was actually 1987. So we've been operating under the same agreement for quite some time now. And both sides have held up their end of the agreement, to my knowledge, for quite a long time, for decades. And about a year and a half ago, the fire chief for the city came to our staff here, myself and some others that have been involved with the agreement, and wanted to really just clean it up, modernize it. We're really not changing anything materially as far as how the station is operated. It really is just, you can imagine since 1987, things have changed. Some of the things revolve around airline service, commercial service requirements, for fire protection that we just don't have any longer. And really just memorializing the fact that we're both committed to operating the fire station long term. We do feel it is a very beneficial agreement for the airport. One of the drawbacks, if this weren't in place and weren't the staffing for the city, is that we don't have A, the budget, or B, the personnel currently to staff our aircraft rescue firefighting trucks. For a number of reasons, that's a benefit that we receive from the city staffing, not only 51 weeks out of the year, but then of course we open a venture, but 51 weeks out of the year, we're very active at the GA airport. Not all GA airports have firefighting services on their field, our services on the field. And so a lot of them are waiting on response from a city unit that might be tied up with something else. So as you can imagine, if an aircraft crashes, see that obviously, but in that situation and there's resulting fire or injuries, we really don't want any longer of a response than necessary to get out there, put out the fire and save someone's life. And so for that reason, it's very important that we continue this agreement with the city. And our recommendation would be to approve the intergovernmental agreement for fire protection services at Whitman Regional Airport between Winnebago County and the city of Oshkosh. Oh, and I'll just add that it's a 1-year agreement that's renewable up to 9 times, so it could be extended to 10 years.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Do you have any discussion from the committee? I'll just make a side note. I don't think a lot of people know that that fire station also serves the city. They always think it's just the airport, but they are covering a portion of the city. And then if they need extra, like you just mentioned, they can go out into other areas in the city because they're city firefighters. So it's not just
just on the other side, another part of that, and I know because way back when I was in school, that was a field trip. They covered, because they covered airport and what they do for the city at that time. I mean, obviously you forget that as you get older, but it's, you know, it's a learning place also for the children in the area, because they do a lot of field trips out there. So, yeah.
One other question with that, then, I know that at some point soon, we're gonna have to get a new truck. Cause I remember seeing it, it's the one, it's old, not even a Pierce. And, sorry. Pierce is owned by Oshkosh Corp. I mean, let's face it, they need to have a Pierce one. So, now, when something like that pulls up because of this, I didn't get into, is that something that is like a shared cost if you upgrade equipment?
So
I didn't
you're likely referring to our 1986. Or
The one that's been like kind of smooshed together
Oh,
that you bought
there's
from
two.
that.
There's two fire, we have a total of 3 ARF trucks. One you may be referring to then is the RIV, we call it RIV, it's a small truck. That truck is, it's not like you just buy that off the shelf. I mean, you can, but the one we have is a kind of a mix match. I'll be on your face.
You bought it from someone down in Texas or something.
Yeah, I think it came from either Texas or Florida. It's a 2-wheel drive vehicle. Which doesn't really help us out too much, but
So the RIV is a 2000 model, year 2000, so that's already 22 years old. The T1500, which is Oshkosh Corp from 1986, which is our other backup big truck, is definitely on the tooth as well. And so there's a couple of vehicles that we're already in discussions about how we go about replacing those, which is a much broader discussion than this agenda item. However, you know, it's something that we will put in our capital planning process. We already have it in our CIP.
We cover it.
But we do it fully. That's what I'm, the question. I didn't look in here, but I didn't find it, but it's not a split cost because the city.
City has their own structural units that they use for the city response, and we have our fees.
Okay, that's just a question. You're good.
Correct. So historically, yes, we have covered the cost.
The entirety of the cost if it's something.
Airfield
that's really
firefighting
Yeah,
trucks.
okay.
Right. We don't pay anything towards the city structural
I was gonna
units.
say, you're not gonna replace
Totally.
points for the city or, you know, yeah.
And the agreement stipulates all that. And so
Okay.
you got the agreement which follows, which is the last like 7 pages of your packet.
Yeah.
Kind of outlines some of those.
Sorry, I didn't get into
Paperwork.
it as much detail as I probably should.
Sure.
The whole.
So yes, we, per the agreement, as far as our firefighting vehicles.
Any other questions?
A couple. The building, I know a number of city fire stations are in a queue, to get replaced. I think fire station 14 is sort of the same vintage as some of those. Is that in the next 10 years, is fire station 14 going to need to be replaced?
So the city, yeah, great question. The city just got done with a citywide, all of their fire stations analysis of those stations, what their shortcomings might be. The recommendations will be for eventual replacements in some cases. And to this point, they've identified a number of shortcomings with our fire station, like I said before, just as mostly a function of the total space for the both city and airfield firefighting needs. A lot of those surround separate like decontamination area, which we don't have, some other things that are, modern firefighting requirements that if a fire station is built today, it would have a lot of things that we don't have that were built 1974. Now, we've done a lot in that fire station over the years to keep it usable, operational, livable, because of course they sleep there. We've done things with the dormitory, we've done things with the kitchen, we've replaced things as much as possible, done what we can within the existing footprint. That said, the city is recommending at some point it be replaced. We don't have a real timeline on that yet. It's something that we're starting to have discussions about between myself and the county executive, how we go about that. It's also obviously a discussion that we have with the city. So they have given us their analysis of all their stations, and literally, I think last week, he dropped off a report which contained all the fire stations. We don't need to read all that, but it was a report this thick from their consultant on all their fire stations. Our section is probably about that thick. And so I don't know if Jason's had a chance to read that yet. I'll drop it off. We got the high level summary from the city a little while back about what their recommendations would be. But we need to dig into, the report on it. And, I would say this at a minimum is a 5-year plus out endeavor to replace a fire station. And there's a lot that has to be discussed and a lot that has to be figured out as far as who pays for what. The agreement is the agreement, but that's separate from replacing a fire station.
Okay, thanks. I will deal with questions about who pays for what at another time then.
Okay.
I want to ask a question about on the contract, the 4C. Reporting says the parties will work collaboratively to ensure that reports required by law, including but not limited to PFAS, are timely and properly filled. Is that a new component for this lease, or was that in previous leases?
I'd have to go back and review the existing agreement, specifically as it calls out PFAS. That's a chemical additive in firefighting foam. The only firefighting foam that's certified by the FAA at this point in time. We've been working on an alternative for many years. And so that's fire stations, airport fire stations essentially across the country are required to have the firefighting foam that contains that chemical. For more broad knowledge, if you don't know, PFAS is contained in Teflon. That was one of the big things that was put into. It's a chemical that is really good for non-stick pans. It's really good for firefighting foam because it helps to my understanding, helps the foam adhere to the actual fuel that would be on fire and extinguish those flames. But it has, in the last few years, been identified with the state as a harmful chemical around water, drinking water, and those chemicals are now regulated by the state as far as a number of different applications. One of those is firefighting foam. So we have a plan in place with the city, with the fire station, on how it's used, how it needs to be remediated when it's used, and that kind of stuff. Have state requirements now that essentially dictate it's only used in an emergency situation. I mean, if someone's life is on the line and there's an active fire, we're going to use it. Have to use it. If we didn't use it, then we have a lot more issues, clearly, and we want to ensure that there's safe airfield up there. But as far as PFAS goes, we have reporting requirements now that it's kind of a different category in the state.
And then, is there anything in the agreement or separately that talks about like mitigation, or if like something, I don't really know, what the words would be, but like, right, if the report or whatever was not good, is there anything that talks about cleanup, or is that just sort of like a deal with it in the future?
Well, the reporting section, we would, if and when, I'm sure there'll be a when at some point, until we get an alternative firefighting foam, it needs to be used. And we would certainly, between us and the city, they're very much into this as well. Because we're not the only application that they have this type of foam with. I mean, they have limited other applications, but other stations have it that contains PFAS. And so this is a nationwide issue. However, the reporting, we would ensure that happens as it's supposed to in the amount of time it's supposed to. But then also the remediation is another kind of discussion. But we have a plan in place for that. Let's just say if an aircraft does have an accident, we need to use it, we hope they have insurance. Okay. Just as an auto accident happens, it's paid for that insurance. However, that's not always the case.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
On that question, so you're saying that this chemical, so I'm just trying to get this clear in my head. This chemical is the only one that's approved to use, but they don't want you to actually use it unless. Pretty
So it's the only firefighting foam that's certified by the
By the
FAA for
right.
use in aircraft
I
fires.
know that there's other foam or other things that they're using out there. I've heard and they actually work better, but it's not approved, right? Okay.
So
So-
for instance, Appleton, Green Bay, Milwaukee.
Everybody uses this because it's the only one that's approved by the FAA. But therefore, the state or the feds are saying that this is really harmful, don't use it unless you absolutely have to. That's basically what it's saying.
EPA, national, right, has largely left it up to the states to decide how it's handled. And most, I believe most states now have filed or passed some sort of legislation, varying different levels of how it's regulated. Some of them were ahead of Wisconsin, some of them are still behind Wisconsin as far as that goes. But in the state of Wisconsin, it's state law now that essentially you cannot use it unless it's an emergency.
Unless it's emergency.
You cannot use it, for instance, to test your phone, because there's a requirement to test your phone, especially for commercial service airports and for us with having AirVenture, to ensure that it meets the specifications that are
So you're not
outlined
allowed
by
to
the
test now.
gets into.
Okay, I'm sorry, I will not get into it anymore. It just surprised me when you said these things because I'm thinking of myself,
Sure.
God, what are they thinking?
I mean, it's good, it's educational for
I
everyone.
get it.
It's educational. for
You don't have to get any more detail.
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
It's good to be aware of.
It's good to be aware, just kind of like the lease thing, right? It's just something that's in your head. You think, why are they doing stuff like that in that way?
So you have parts of the government that don't agree.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
I would say the FAA is slower than the state.
I would say they are, just from the experience.
Well, they're cautious, maybe not slower, but more cautious when they see things in a
More
broader
resistant to
picture.
change.
Well, they see things that is a more broader picture where they use like basically the same EPA is like, no, you gotta change this now. Well, you can't do that. I got you. I'm sorry, I will stop. I digress. We want to get out of here.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Anybody else have any discussion on that? Not seeing any. Let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Bye.
Opposed? No. Okay, item 7, operations and maintenance update, Jason.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time this morning. Some of the things we've done since the end of AirVenture are some of the things that we hadn't had time to complete leading up to AirVenture. So we got some more airfield painting done. Taxiway Charlie and all of its connecting taxiways have been repainted, as well as the north ramp out here, the terminal ramp, and the area in front of the corporate hangars. That's all been repainted as well. We've been working on the 24-hour fuel pump for the self-serve fuel island over here, which is still not up and running yet. Some parts, however, getting some lights over top of that. We have some lights that were ordered back in March that are still on back order. And we do intend to go ahead with installing the base for the light post. And we're going to be working on that next week. So at least when the lights come in, we'll be up and running, waiting on that. Some sign upgrades we've been taking care of out on the airfield, the LED directional signs that are out there, or the old quartz bulb or incandescent bulb lights that were in those are being replaced. I think we have maybe 2 left, 2 or 3 left, and then we'll have complete LED lights for all the signs that are on the airfield. Still a mix between incandescent bulbs and LED bulbs for the airfield, the actual airfield light. Other than that, we're getting back into mowing after the slow period where things didn't really grow much because of the lack of rain. It's starting to grow again, so we're working on mowing and then getting all of our snow equipment ready for, 2 months from now or so.
4 months from now, January.
Just like that, go from green to brown.
And why in the event?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Number 8, EAA report. Sean.
Good morning. Allowing us to chime in each month. Really not a lot this time. We did have our first full day retreat on planning mixtures event last week. Kind of a very strong and robust list of ideas are now coming to light that we pursue and develop and see what becomes reality. Out of that, though, I think one that's definitely going to be there, it's very exciting to us, is it's our 70th anniversary conversation. So 70 years of the AA next year. But nothing else to add, really.
Any questions or comments? You have one?
May I?
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about the status of the expansion to the west, the relocation of the ultralight strip, and where that's at.
Okay, so the new field and the development of that property, we're still very much working on the compliance aspects of what it's going to take to establish that as a one-way. Working with state, the approach corridors and the things that will have to be met. When I say a runway, turf ops, private, not a the elements there, though, and the property that we've got versus what may be required, we're still working through that. There's a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of details. It's still a 45 route kind of thing. We are going to be focusing, though, for this next year, finishing the development of that new property area through that new fence that was just put in, so that we can have it. We were within 2 rows this year of running out of parking again. So we didn't have to turn anybody away, which is our mantra. But because it makes it for a whole different experience. If you fly from California to here and you get to Oshkosh and we see the fields closed to aircraft camping, go to another airport, it just changes the whole week. So we made some big strides to get to that point where we're no longer turning people away, but we're really close to not meeting that. But we're going to have to at least have that area ready for additional parking. It's not 40 minutes.
If they want to be here, we want to accommodate them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, number 9, chairman's report. Number 10, committee members' statements, suggestions for future agenda.
An update on the, maybe an update on the windows in the tower. I don't know.
Yeah, we have I can't remember the dates, we have a pre-construction meeting set with the contractor is signed, so here in, I think in early October, we meet with them, and then they're planning on changing the windows out in one day on October 7th.
Wow, that's quick and fast and nice.
So
Awesome.
if anybody wants to be in an open air tower cab for about 20, 30 minutes or whatever, how long it takes to swap the windows.
You
Let
made
us know.
you jinx yourself. It's gonna rain that day.
Should I roll by them in the B-25 and scare them?
Yeah.
Ah, there you go.
Time it just right. And there'll be a crane in there too, so.
Well, that's really
Get to
cool.
it.
Negative goes right to the cabinet.
I didn't think you could be done that quick. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for that update.
Okay, and set next meeting date. I have first Wednesday of October, back to that, October 5th. Yeah, you can make it.
I will be just coming back from my big trip, from my first meeting.
This Thursday morning.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So,
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Bye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
These are
Actually-
amazing. I was, does anyone?
Actually-
for these?
actually, I talked
That's just
to,
first amendment to the budget.
I actually talked to John.
Awesome.